Hey everyone, welcome back to Snakes on the Brain. It's been a while since I've really upset a lot of people, and I think today might be the day where I might get a few people pretty upset with me. At least as far as reptile content goes, I'm still pretty good at upsetting a lot of people. Ignore the clomping around. Our dog is currently in heat, and because we don't want to have puppies every single heat, she is separated off. She's not out working, so she's hanging out with us in the house right now. So, for all of you watching this lovely morning, afternoon, night, driving to work, or whatever may have you, today I want to talk about something that kind of happened locally-ish here in the reptile community. But it's going to have some broad-reaching things. So, for a lot of people, at least listening in Colorado or who follow a certain group, there was some legislation that was proposed here in the state of Colorado that had to do with essentially registering animals. To where I'm going to keep it super broad strokes, so don't come at me about this, is that they wanted to have every single pet identified and registered in the entire state. Dog, cat, snake, amphibian, invertebrate, chicken, fish. Every single one. It was that broad of terminology. There were other things in there that had to do with like naming, essentially who would get the animal in case of an accident or a tragedy, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because there is a big problem with people who pass away and there's nowhere for their animals to go, and so they end up in shelters or they end up on the street or worse, right? So that part isn't necessarily bad, but just the super broad, vague terminology of every animal. And they even sat there and listed fish, amphibian, reptile, bird, everything like that. Essentially anything that wasn't livestock on a ranch or working animals. So, like, I wouldn't have to register my goats or turkeys or livestock guardians, but everything else, which was over 6 months old. And, you know, what this certainly was a special interest group gave a newer politician, and it's not just newer politicians. It's the reason why all the Lacey Act legislation and bill that Senator Rubio from Florida puts in like twice a year is exactly the same. It's because a special interest group says, here is a check, here is a bill, make it happen. And that's exactly what happened in this case. Is, you know, a special interest group gave a politician this info, just gave them this legislation, which is why it was so broad and so general. A lot of the time, actual politicians or longer established lobbyist groups are much more intricate. And it used to be very sneaky, but now a lot of people say the part out loud. They would be very sneaky about how they word and phrase different things. And so that's how you know a lot of the times these special interest groups that are not as politically conniving, I guess, I don't know. You see a lot of these things happen a lot in a lot of the different state and county and city legislations. Not usually city level, because a lot of times those are, you know, like one council person or mayor or something has like one high person that gives them money to get something passed. But, you know, USARC, United States, you know, the keeper, responsible keepers. Oh my goodness, I am totally spacing out on the USARC's actual name. But USARC, they are essentially the lobbyist group for reptile keepers. And I'm aware that has some negative connotations to it, and we're going to get into that a little bit. But, you know, they sent out the email push notification. They let us know on Facebook, and it spread like wildfire. And as someone who has been involved with animals as long as I have, not just reptiles, but also I used to foster dogs for a long time. Almost as long as I've been keeping reptiles, I was fostering dogs. And I still technically do from time to time. I knew there was zero chance of this passing. to where I honestly didn't even feel I needed to share this. I still did, but because of how far-reaching and how broad it was, as soon as the general populace outside of the reptile community, so, every single person with more than 2 dogs, found out about it, and it was struck down almost overnight. It was unfortunate that a lot of death threats were made to this particular politician and the associated party, obviously, that they're part of, which sucks. You don't want to hear that in any case. But it was struck down very, very quickly and almost immediately. But, so while that's good, and, while I do believe it is necessary to have good, sensible regulation and laws for not only the animals' benefit, but for us as well, because we have been shown that we can be very bad at policing ourselves. I was really glad that USARK was there to share that. I know that a lot of people have some mixed feelings with USARK, and I get that. Any lobbyist group out there that keeps their books open or not, or to what regard it's kept open, there's always some speculation about where all that money goes, about how it's being spent, as well as, especially in the present climate that we live in, it just sounds like scare tactics, right? To where, oh, hey, there's this animal law. Oh my, everyone freak out, right? But I am glad that they are there to let people know. And they have come to bat for Colorado before. I've talked about this in other podcasts and other videos and stuff too. But there's an agency in Colorado that essentially kind of embodies a lot of the animal welfare and things like that in the state. So, the people who look for the registered breeders of dogs, the people who keep pet stores, exotic birds, things like that. They're not with the state. They operate within the state and some corporation with them, but they're not affiliated with Colorado State Parks and Wildlife or that sort of thing that most keepers and reptile people usually and generally think of. They're a separate entity. It went back to where they wanted to have all of these different licenses and permits that were specific for a lot of people outside of just the people who bred more than 2 litters of kittens a year. So it was you would be designated as a reptile breeder if you had the wording on it changed multiple times before it finally went to essentially community discourse for a council meeting. What it essentially came down to more than, I think it was 25 of any animal of a reptile, and by that I mean snake, bearded dragon, whatever. And then, but if you had more than 3 female of that species, then you would be designated breeder, and it was a couple $100 a year, plus inspections and all these other things. To where, as a person who, if this is going to make your livelihood and you are selling to the public and to multiple other entities, I think holding yourself to a certain standard isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it was very ignorantly put in there. There was not a whole lot of understanding that, a ball python, an iguana, a Cuban tree frog is not a macaw. It's not a dog. It's not a cat. And so a lot of the wording for this law was put into place without a whole lot of actual knowledge of how these animals exist. And even then, they're still back and forth now quite a few years later, almost, I think, 10 years later, about how, uromastyx aren't ball pythons and chameleons aren't crested geckos. And they can't all be kept the same way. There is quite a bit of anonymity to how we have to keep all these animals. This is why keeping multiple species can be so difficult. So I'm glad that USARK is there. But, so that's, and other people also have issues with USARK about how almost all of their wording and, it's also really great that they have pre-made emails as well as email lists where all you literally have to do is copy and paste all of the people who are on that particular group or committee or whatever it is, And then you just copy and paste that in the to field, and then you copy and paste the wording of this pre-made letter for them, and then you just write sincerely, then like your name and like the city and county you live in or whatever. That's really helpful, but a lot of the times their wording is very exclusionary to like environmental impacts, to where it's all like the business and numbers side of it, which isn't bad. That's them talking their talk. Politicians are all about the money and the numbers. So they're talking, the politicians talk. And a lot of times it works. But a lot of people get upset that they are leaving out the environmental issues or consequences about keeping reptiles or about passing these laws, which for a lot of people who exist outside of the business part of this aspect feel that we have been lacking, and they're not wrong, about our messaging to where the environmental issues, where the larger public, actually that's their idea or focus of the hobby. So, when all the stuff is happening down in Florida with the iguanas and the pythons and the tegus and all that stuff, it was all about it's going to wreck industry, which is true. It's not great for small businesses, and there's a lot of little things that go into there, like PVC makers and lumber people and glass people, and then feed, and then there's little. The one hobby has a lot of little reaching branches, which is true. However, doesn't address issues like how everyone thinks that Burmese pythons are taking over the Everglades. Are they an issue? Yes. Should they be there? No. Is the reason why they're always exaggerated? Yes. Are their numbers always exaggerated? Yes. However, it still needs to be talked about and addressed. But because it never is, that is one of the other reasons why a lot of people have issues with USARK. So maybe if anyone from USARK is actually listening or wants to talk to Phil or anything like that, maybe we start talking about a way that we need to start having, it sucks to say this, but like a branding or like a marketing thing or of pushing that side of it to make it to where like the environment impacts are closer based on science and closer to reality about different things. But with all of that in mind, there is something that I see happen all of the time when it comes to, oh no, this new law is being passed, or oh no, they're doing this. And it's the whole thing of you shouldn't read the comments. But that's what we all end up inevitably doing, as well as it does kind of get the idea of what a lot of people are thinking, regardless of their guise of anonymity or whatever may have you, which was a lot of people, instead of going, okay, how can I help? And then, like USARK, just follow the prompts, or like contact this person or whatever may have you. What can we do to fight this? Those sorts of responses. A lot of people will say, and this isn't just what happened, a couple weeks ago. A lot of people will say, now they obviously make it super political. But even without that, it's, boy, sure glad I decided not to move to X city or X state, or glad we moved out of Y state, or, well, I guess, we were thinking about moving, but we definitely have to leave. Their response to this issue that we are let known at a very early stage, instead of saying, how can we change this? How can we talk about it? It's to run and hide. And I see that all the time. And it's not just with the pet stuff. It's with so many issues. And I'm going to do my best not to make this political in any way, other than the fact that we're dealing with laws and legislation. So there's going to be some political discourse in there. But I'm not going to sit there and go conservative and liberal or anything like that. As best as I possibly can. But that is, just ignore the filter in the back. It's a new filter, and it's always pushing air through, and it can take sometimes a week, and it has like a purge that does every single day. Blah blah blah. So just ignore that. Poof poof in the back. But so many people will run and hide. And there is a phrase which is silence is complacence. And if you are not outwardly speaking against whatever it is that you are opposed to, you are staying silent, your silence is added to the for it. It is added to that. Again, not making this super political, but if you are not speaking out up for the oppressed, your silence is added to the mass of the oppressors. So if you are not speaking out against whatever legislation, whatever law, whatever it is, then your silence is essentially you saying you're okay with it. And people saying that, oh, I don't want to deal with this, or I just want to get out of Dodge, which arguably, technically, that's what I did, although I did try to deal with my animal issues in the city that I lived in. They did not want to work with me on that. So we ended up lucking out and getting out of Dodge, but not after trying to fight it for about 3 years. Then you're just... I don't want to say that you're part of the problem, because that's kind of mean to say and not wholly without context to it. But you're not helping in any way. If you don't like what's happening, but you don't speak up, even to just copy and pasting, it took me 92 seconds to send from 4 separate email addresses, copy and pasting the USARC, CC field, and body text, and even changing up the sincerely from each time. If you don't even do that much, then you're not helping in any way, and your silence is saying that you're okay with that. And I know there's a lot of naysayers that will sit there and say, well, you could say that like that, it is really spam emailing, but that kind of online petition thing, like when has an online petition ever changed anything? For all the millennials out there, and obviously some Gen Xers too, you remember the Firefly, when Firefly got canceled and everyone was like, bring back Firefly, and there were all these online petitions, and then they made the movie, and regardless of how you feel about the movie, they made the movie. But that wasn't because of all the online petitions, it was because so many people bought the DVDs of Firefly. It's why Family Guy came back, it's why Futurama came back, and so that's where a lot of people think that these online petitions, or whatever it is, don't hold a lot of weight to them. And in a lot of cases, you're not wrong. However, especially for all my Coloradans out there, if you are one of the people who feel one way or the other about the wolves that were reintroduced into Colorado, not the ones that showed up on their own, but the ones that were voted into to be as a thing that was going to be happening, and you feel one way or the other about that, just remember that the summer before, there were petitions going around in a lot of major cities to get put onto a ballot, And that's what it is. In these small little local things, in your city, in your council, in your state, that the mass of people does hold weight. So for the wolves thing, because so many thousands of people, and no, not just Boulder and Denver, I was in Colorado Springs a lot that summer, and multiple times people came up to me about that. So if you're not super familiar with Colorado, Denver is the biggest one. Colorado Springs is the second largest one. There's a lot more people that would be in the political spectrum that would have said, don't do that in Colorado Springs versus Denver and Boulder. There were still pages and pages and pages of people with names on those little lists down there. That got put onto the ballot. And then it passed on the ballot. So when an organization like USARC or whoever lets you know at such an early stage where you can actually do something about it, and people choose to hide behind their keyboards, to not to close their doors, and to say, hopefully it doesn't come for me, that leads to a lot of issues. There's another popular thing that I see online a lot, which is when they came for Burmese pythons, it didn't affect me, so I stayed quiet. When they came for iguanas, it didn't affect me, I stayed quiet. When they came for tegus, it didn't affect me, I stayed quiet. But when they come for my ball pythons, oh, then I'll speak up. It's a systematic thing down is what they're working their way for, special interest groups, not only in this country, but across the world, don't want any animals in captivity. A snake, a cat, a cow. They don't want that. And they have a lot of money because they hold public opinion their way. Again, talking about possibly USARK's phrasing, where we need to talk about more than just the financial aspects, but the environmental aspects, or heck, even the mental health aspects about keeping animals that I've talked about in other podcasts and with other people. And this is an opportunity for people to actually make real change. And I know it is scary to put yourself out there to where you are taking that spotlight and putting it on yourself to where, you were kind of living in, they were of ignorance of you, where you were living kind of incognito about it. But if you don't speak out, then they get steamrolled. And sometimes you have to put yourself out there. You do kind of have to sacrifice that for the betterment of everybody. That's why women can vote. That's why I can vote. So, just something to think about. When you see things online about these sort of laws or changes or propositions or things like that, where it's very easy to just kind of turn tail and hide. There will be a time when eventually it'll come for you. And in opportunities like this, the USARK is very good about letting us know so early on, especially during time periods where it can make real change, even without going to court over it, which they have done there as well, and they've won before too. But so many laws across so many states, the traveling animal bans, the ordinances about snake length or species type, so many of them get tabled and shelved and thrown out because the people say we don't want that. And I'm not going to sit there and say it's tyranny, it's fascism, which hopefully that word doesn't get flagged. But I'm not going to sit there and say that. It's, if something will affect you and your community, wouldn't you want to do your best to protect it? So hopefully didn't get too negative, didn't get too morose, and didn't get political. And you guys got something out of this, and you stick around with me. I have another one that's going to be a little bit more talking about reptiles coming up soon. Although you'll notice still probably a fair bit of commonality with a lot of these themes on these episodes. But hey, hopefully you guys are enjoying this. It's a little bit of a change of pace. I know I've done these kind of ranty talks before in regular videos, and yeah, these are obviously still being presented visually as well as audibly now. But hopefully you guys enjoy this, and it's a little bit different. It's more than just, hey, look at this really cool animal. It's something for you to kind of think about and digest a little bit. Maybe give you inspiration for something else. So hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video. If you want to check out the rest of the episodes, please do. And stay tuned for more fun reptile podcasts. So then you guys can help me get these snakes on my brain. And until next time, hope you're having a great day, and we'll check you next time.